right. Hey, welcome to the Big Story Podcast. I'm Alex Morrissey. We like to sit down, have a nice chat with some creators, learn some stuff, spread some love, splash a little hype, have a great day. Today we have Russell Nohelty joining us from California. Russell, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to have a beverage sip too. I'm going to...
It's real important when you are doing so many interviews that you got to stay hydrated, man.
Yeah. So our interviews pretty common in your weekly routine or your monthly routine?
Probably every 3 months. So I release roughly 4 big launches a year. Yep. And I learned from fashion designers to work in kind of like a wave. Mm-hmm. So like you have like a development cycle, then you have like a prep cycle, then you have like the launch cycle, and you have like the down cycle. Mm-hmm. And so I do all of my interviews like sort of the month before or during a launch. Right. And then I try really hard to not do anything when I'm not like about to launch, because it's so much. It takes you out of your day. It's a whole nother set of like skills. Yep. And people, I don't think, appreciate just how hard sitting and talking for hours is, even if you're just sitting like in your room talking.
It is tough. I've had because you feel like after that, and it's like you're really keyed up, so like by the end of it, you're just kind of like running. And we used to do the show live. So, we'd wrap up like 10:30, 10:45, and I would just be like, I couldn't sleep. Like I would just be, pegged. So that's why one of the main reasons we shifted to recording these things, because it was just, I needed to sleep, man. Like I couldn't go. So
yeah, I always drink caffeine before I do a show, because I'm not usually quite as high energy and people also don't think you need to go, another notch or notch and a half up from like your normal energy level to make it seem like you're not super deflated on camera. Yeah. So it's like a whole process. It's weird how much like performance there is in doing like just writing or doing any promotional things that you have to do.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I remember when I was doing the circuit, the comic book convention circuit, it was a big, it's a ton of work. It's a ton of work to sit at a table and engage with people all day, all afternoon for days on end. It's a very challenging experience. So, but these are like sort of like I don't know. I have this, that theory, like you put a camera on somebody and it's just like, you like everyone elevates everything about their persona. So,
well, I learned this thing from Russell Brunson many years ago about the magnetic or attractive character, which was how you kind of tweak things when you're on camera or when you're out front facing your like business, whether it's writing or whatever. And it's like, it's how you tweak up like the things people really like about you. Yeah. You tweak down like the things that people like don't so much like about you, so that like you attract the right people to you. So I think that a lot of people do this, like they just amplify everything.
Sure. Yeah.
And I learned that it shows actually to like how to do the like, hey, the things that you guys like, I'm going to make to 20. The stuff that like people generally say are not so attractive, like I'm turning that down to a 1.
Right.
But tweaking your personality in any way is like hard, because you still want to have those like things that you want to do.
Yeah, the wiring's the wiring, like it's what it is. And but then, I guess maybe I should probably have a little questionnaire fill out, and I hand it out to people. I'm like, okay, so how was your speaking with me? And on a scale of 1 to 5, did you like this about me? So then you can find the things that you can turn down.
Yeah, and you do get those sometimes. I do a lot of these things, and you get those sometimes. You do get, but like I always feel like, what am I gonna say? Like, you just talked to me, like who I am. Like, am I really gonna give you a 1? Like, how are you gonna edit my episode? Like, if that happens. So like I always, but I mean, I've been very blessed by. I think that I've enjoyed 99% of the interviews I've ever done, and once you're done with it, you kind of goes out of your head. because you're
Yeah.
like, wait, what happened? An hour and a half went by.
Yeah.
What did we talk about?
Well, it's funny, when we were first starting to do this, and I was reaching out to people, this sort of like, hey, do you want to commit an hour and a half of your life to talking to strangers, kind of thing? A lot of people were like, I don't know what I would talk about for that time, and I'm like, you will be amazed at how fast it goes by. Like once it starts and you get engaged, this whole sort of kind of sense of like, because you're just talking, and listen, our favorite subject typically is ourselves, so it's great to kind of like just get people going on their own riff. So you said you were talking about like the discussing it with people, and like, and the energy levels, like, and the net 1% of the podcast, like, it's a very strange feeling, and I hope no one's experienced it here, on this one. But man, like, I've been on one or two, but like, where you sit there and you go, ooh, I don't know if I'm in the right place. Like, you
Yeah.
really you go, okay, and it just feels like my brain goes in triage mode. I'm like, all right, so just make sure we don't say the wrong thing, or
I was on one once that was like, the way you do business is wrong. And I was
oh,
like, he's like,
okay.
you can't possibly believe the things you believe about. And I
Oh,
was
wow.
like, what? And so like, I mean, I've never gotten that like direct thing from
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
But it was about like how like I don't maximize every dollar. Like I'm trying to enjoy this
Oh,
thing, and like I'm trying to like he's like, no, you need to do things these ways because it's more like you'll make more money. And I was like, yeah, but I won't like the thing that I'm doing
right.
as much. And he couldn't get into his head that like people could want to have a business that does
Mhm.
not like make the every dollar possible. And I was like, you haven't met a lot of writers then, or like
Yeah.
artists, because like every day they make decisions that are like, well, that's 200 grand I'm not going to make because
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
It's absolutely counterintuitive. Like, you know, I made this conscious effort. Like, I could, like, my business has been graphic design for decades. And I go, like, I could start a firm and I could have employees and I could do that, but I don't want to be the manager. Like, I want to be the person doing the work. And it's, sure, it might be ego, but the thing is, it's a joy factor. Like, I want to solve the business problem with a creative solution. Like, I want to get to that point. So I don't want to like sit there and go, okay, so what are the objectives for this thing? And have you spoken to like, just, I don't want to be hand holding. I hate hand holding. Drives me
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
So,
And I
uh,
think we live in a world where people always think you have to go to everyone wants to go to the next thing. Like everyone
sure.
wants to go from the laborer to the office worker to the manager to the owner. And like, I think that the more that I see, the more I understand that, you can, if you just want to be the writer or like the graphic designer, or,
Mhm.
you want to work very like with clients one-on-one or whatever, like this life is very hard.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't all be trying to run 500, 700 person businesses. Like I'm a very good publisher, but I don't want to publish anyone's work but my own, because
Right.
that takes me away from making my own stuff.
I no, I totally get that. I absolutely get that. So let's talk about the writing thing. I you I you put I got on your newsletter. So you've been sending some really nice and compelling newsletters, kind of telling your story, which I think have been great to read. And in there, discussed your, I guess your first sort of foray was into screenwriting, I guess years ago,
Yeah.
and how you got real close, but it just didn't come together. And it was sort of like one of these things, you could either just throw your hands up and kind of walk away from the dream of taking from what's in here and putting it out into the world in some form, or take another swing at it. And you did. So we're like, what were your first sort of like, were you writing stories as a kid, or were you one of these people who kind of sort of hit a sort of a threshold where you're like, I've got to tell stories, like, because I know there's like kind of two people when it comes to story makers, and
I always thought it was more the second, but my
yeah.
mother a couple of years ago gave me a folder, a very large folder with all sorts of like poetry that had been published when I was a kid and like newspaper articles they had written and all sorts of. I was the editor in chief of my yearbook.
Oh, okay.
So like, thinking back on it, I think I was more story driven
Mhm.
than I initially thought. But I mean, I helped write a one act play when I was in high school with like a group of people that went to state. So I mean, I think that I clearly always was a storyteller because like my mother showed me, but I
Yeah.
would not have thought of it until she never really, like, I'd been saying this stuff for years. She's like, okay, okay, okay. And then like one year I went home for Christmas, she just like handed me this.
Well, wait, so I mean, but that's it. I mean, that's interesting, because like, I mean, everybody has like this memory of themselves and growing up, but it's really curious that you didn't think that was the thing. So like, what did you think was it, did you have like a friends that you saw who were writing stuff all the time and you thought like, boy, they're just writers, they're writing those crazy stories, and or like, how did you view the world in that sense?
The group that I hung out with very much wanted to be filmmakers. We
Okay.
wanted to be Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, Kevin
Okay.
Smith, like in that
Yeah.
indie vein. And that's the kind of stuff that we talked about and thought
Mhm.
about. And like, yes, writing, directing was part of that, but I was very much more interested in the directing part. I started
Okay.
actually acting and then directing and then like cinematography and then eventually moved to directing. So I was very much like filmmaker oriented, and it really confused me how like a decade after college, like nobody made a film and I did, and I was like, but this was the thing, and like
Right.
they all moved on to have families and all of this stuff, and I'm always very very confused even today how I'm the one who still makes stuff and nobody in my school who was way more talented than I was
Right.
has done the same.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's super interesting because I think we all like we grow up in like, there's always these definitions that you see around, oh, that person's a sports person, that person's the smart kid, that person's the whatever kid, and I think I was always the kid who was like the second best artist in the public opinion of the of the my peers in school, or but it was really interesting to see, like, you go back, now I look back and like there's friends of mine, like I have a friend of mine from high school who's published 4 5 novels now. Didn't know, like, I never would have pegged it, but but his books are great, and I'm like, oh well, okay, he clearly was, something was going on upstairs for him all those years. But like, but it's interesting, like, you had like this vision of, so I guess your vision was like, probably like at the age of 14, you're like, you sort of, you like the dawn of whatever that sort of like sense of self and coolness as a sort of more mature individual comes into play, and you're like, oh well, it's film for me, like, as you were saying, it's
Yeah,
Tarantino.
it was watching Clerks. I remember
Yeah.
because Clerks was made for like $26,000 on credit cards, and like this was back in the '90s, and
Yeah.
it went to Sundance, and like he had a whole career, and like I just said, oh, you could just make stuff,
Yeah.
like you could just make it,
Yep.
and I mean it's very risky to put 26 grand on a credit card, and it worked
Yeah.
out for him, and I kind of embodied that spirit for my whole career. I mean, these are all books that I have made with no
Yeah.
one's permission, and movies and stuff. It's just I had very deep and visceral connection to this. Like, you could just make stuff. Like, you could just,
Right.
and maybe it'll be bad, maybe it'll be great. Like, maybe people will respond to it, maybe it won't. But like, you can just do it.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I mean, like, but I get the draw. Like, I get the draw of like, of those films. I mean, they were really really strong messages in the time of like, there was like, okay, there's a new voice of cinema that's coming out, and I'm lumping these makers together, but it was very different than what was happening in the 80s. So there's this
Mm.
huge sort of sea change, not on a giant financial scale, but it was this thing happened and people are like, oh, we can really do this. And I think what we have is a sort of that modern indie film is, is that result of those films that were these really sort of singular voice films, movies, whatever.
Yeah,
And so like, your sort of your idea, like, oh, I want to do direction, I mean, because everything you sort of stated was very visual. These were like cinematography, the obviously direction, like, but you're writing, and you're writing a lot. So what was the, like, what's that shift for you? I mean, were you saying, okay, now I'm going to write scripts, or did you, like, how did you, because I mean, things have to happen for people to make these sort of changes in their life. And
sure. So when you're a cinematographer, really anyone but the writer, like you're waiting for somebody else. I mean, as a writer, you're also waiting for other people to like buy the thing, but
yeah,
like everyone is waiting in line for the script.
yep,
And as I worked backwards kind of from acting to like editing and cinematography. And then you have to be hired by like a director. And I was like, okay, I'll do directing. And then I got in a pretty bad car accident in 2008.
uh,
And I couldn't direct or shoot photography. I was a fashion photographer, and like I did a whole bunch of other stuff.
mhm.
But I started doing these shorts pretty much right out of college. I went like 35 grand into debt or something to buy all this gear, started making shorts. And then we made a movie in 2007. And it just, I sort of kept being on sets and saying, but these are not good. Or like, these are like, I could do this. Or
Right.
like, why am I waiting for someone to hire me when I could? And I had some very cool, like I went to Denmark to shoot a movie once. And I had like a lot of cool experiences directing like horror stuff and not directing, shooting like horror stuff and things. But it always came down to like, I needed somebody to rely on somebody else. And I'm not getting any younger. Even at 22 or 23, I was like, I'm not getting any younger. Like Kevin Smith directed Clerks when he was, I forget now, 25 or 26. And I
Yeah.
was like, if I want that kind of trajectory, like I need to get going.
Mhm.
And the only option really was to write a script, to like
Yeah.
write the thing, because then once you write it, you can cast it. Once you cast it, you can direct it. Once you direct it, you can edit it.
Yeah.
And so it really came pretty out of necessity for me. I didn't super love the first thing that I made, but it was supposed to be a stepping stone to the next thing. It's still out there. I
Yeah.
think that still is a very competently made, well acted mumblecore type web series.
Okay.
But like it was not supposed to be the only movie I made. It was supposed to be the movie we made very quickly that we could then use to get funding for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the
Right.
next thing. And then 7 years went by of editing. And then other stuff. I directed other stuff that fell through. I directed another web series called Save Point that never came through because the effects stuff fell apart afterwards, and then the
Right.
producer moved on.
Ugh.
I did a reality show. I also was an executive producer of this internet television network called 100 Dimensions for a while. So I would make my own. I made my own TV show there, and
Cool.
and did all this stuff. But it took so long, and it was so
Yeah.
many people involved that the scripting is like, I don't want to say it's pure, but much the way that art is, it's like you start with a blank canvas,
Mhm.
and then like there's a thing
Yeah.
afterwards, and like then there is an inker and a colorist and a letterer who does all this stuff, but like you aren't waiting for anyone to make that thing. And that's what's always appealed to me about writing.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's in my wife is an artist. So like it's, we get grouped in as, the artistic, oh, you guys are artists, I'm like, I'm not an artist. Like I do work for other people. Like I draw comic books for a company, or I design a logo or a website for another company, but like, I'm not an artist. I'm like, I'm solving, other people's problems. And I had to come up with my own, like, a definition, like, the designer solves, an answer, a question for everybody,
Hmm.
and an artist solves a question for themselves. And it was like this kind of like thought process, and like when you were saying this permission thing, like it totally like wrung out like that. That's really the thing, is that you don't have to, like you said, no one's saying like, hey, Russ, I'm gonna call you Russ here in this story. Like, hey, Russ, like, would you mind writing this book for us? And it's like, if you got that call and if the money was right, you'd be like, well, okay, if I can fit it in my schedule, I'll do it. But it's not something you want to do because it's not what you want to do. And
I will say that I've gotten much more because I do contract work as well, and it's
right.
gotten a lot. My life has gotten a lot different since I've written like 40 books, and like I have a body of work. Like I
Yeah.
would say when I was starting, I wanted a body of work. Like that's not even all of them,
I
but
know
like
that's not 40, but that's a lot.
I mean that's
Yeah.
like nonfiction and fiction and anthologies, and like I just wanted to be able to say, you like comics, here's this 16 issue comic I did, like here's this 10 book series. Like I wanted to have a body of work, and while I was working on that body of work, I didn't want it to be owned by other people. I want to be able to do whatever I want with it. Like I don't want to be in Kindle Unlimited or any, like I just want to have it. I want to be able to do anything I want with it. But as I've been doing this now for over 10 years, and now I've written just so many books that I feel like I feel like I'm a good enough writer to write someone else's work, which I didn't feel. I feel like it's a different skill writing your own things, doing that well, and writing someone else's vision well.
Yeah.
And I think that I wasn't very good for a long time at hearing someone's vision and then being able to say, I know how to interpret that correctly.
Sure. That's a skill set that you have to develop. That's not, I mean, maybe there are rare instances where that's a natural ability, but you do have to go through the talking to people and then going, okay, is that it? And they go, well, not exactly. And then you have to kind of, you learn the things that you really are picking up and, gaining that information from micro gestures. Did you happen to watch our episode with Alex Segura?
I didn't.
If you haven't, check it out, because Alex is a writer, comic book writer, and working with Archie for years. But he also wrote the novel, Poe Dameron novelization book for Star Wars last year. I think it was last year. And it was one of those things where like he had been writing a whole bunch of stuff, but then all of a sudden he gets his call saying, do you want to write a Star Wars book? There's only one 3-letter word that comes with that, so he was, and it's an interesting thing, but like, I bet you, like, if the question you sort of paralleled your thought process, he would be like 5 years or a few years before that, he probably would have been like, I don't know if I could do that. It's
yeah, and I just don't, it wasn't even like, I probably was skilled enough to do it, but I wasn't confident in being able to say, like, I've spent my career doing my own thing. And now people give me like, are like, hey, you want to write this? You want to write that? Also, for a long time, people just thought I was self-publishing, and that was like the thing. Like I was like doing my own thing. And so I've spent the last year or so telling people, no, I don't. Like, only I work with a bunch of anthologies. I'm in a bunch of anthologies. I write stuff for other people in a small way, and I'm ready to do it in a big way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it was there's something about I've always appreciated about like people who work for Marvel and DC and who fulfill other people's visions, because like they can see, they can take the macro expressions, and they can take the like what someone says and then what they really mean because they've heard it a dozen times, and they can do they can feel out a market in a way that like I haven't traditionally been able to do that because I'm just making my own thing.
Right.
So I feel like that is a very a skill that like takes a long time to develop. For me, it took a long time to develop in me.
Yeah, it's I mean, there was someone said it recently, and it was something like, is it like the difference between writing your own thing and writing something for like Marvel? Like, you're doing it, when you write something for Marvel or DC or any other publisher, you're writing something in a direction where you love the characters, but that doesn't, the product doesn't love you back. But when you write your own thing, it's a two-way street. Like you're giving and receiving in a sort of a creative and emotional fashion. So it's kind of cool. So all right, films, story, you're doing this stuff, and then it sounds like you hit a sort of a point. And what happened to you? Like, what did you say? That you were like, you were like, I'm gonna bin this $35,000 worth of 5-year-old film equipment and go get that job at the whatever factory? Or like, how did you like shift like your creative sort of drive, because you were making stuff for yourself, but like, how did you?
Well, there was a pretty clear break. I got in a car accident, was in a neck
What?
brace, couldn't direct
Okay.
stuff, and then we moved to Los Angeles. Got married and moved to Los Angeles within 6 months. Within 6 months, I got in a car accident, lost my job. I got married, moved to Los Angeles. There was and I had to sell a bunch of my gear to afford moving and all of that stuff. So like we so that was a pretty clean break. And
Yeah.
for those 6 months, I really couldn't do anything but write. And
Okay.
someone had told me years ago, like, your first 10 scripts are going to suck.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm stuck in a basically like on my couch for 6
Right.
months. The only thing I do is like go to physical therapy. So like, I guess I'm just going to write, and I'll just write 10 crappy scripts. And then maybe I'll figure out one. And one of them became My Father Didn't Kill Himself. And one of them became something else. And I got one of those optioned at a very, very small company. And it ended up being like I fell in love with it because I could do what I wanted. And when we moved to Los Angeles, I pretty soon after that had two scripts, one for this show called Wannabes and one for this show called Gumshoes, which got me my first manager in 2009. And then we tried to do all the things that you do and just like do and it wasn't really working. And then one day he worked at this company that had the license for that had made Halloween. It's like they did Halloween.
Okay.
And he had like stacks of comics, and he did a Halloween comic and all of this stuff. And he's like, have you ever thought about making this into a comic? And like, I hadn't read comics in a long time. And I was like, well, I haven't read these since like the 90s. Like, I'm not really into like big muscly things and stuff and like superheroes. Right. And he's like,
look at those guns that you got there. Of course you are.
Well, he sent him a big stack and was like, here, just read these.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then
cool.
tell me what you think. And I read them and I was like a bad movie costs like $100,000 to make. Yeah. Like a movie with like no budget and like,
sure.
Like, I mean, it cost less, but like this was 10, 15 years ago. So like there wasn't like Canon XL1 camera. Like there were like very basic rudimentary things. So like it cost the movie that I made cost like $40,000. And like, it was very basic.
Right.
Two people walk into a camera, talk, and then like there may be some B-roll. And like, that's the whole thing. And so I was reading these comics and they were doing, I mean, the things that comics do.
Yeah.
And I was like, how much do these cost? And like, he told me like it costs less than 10 grand to do like a trade of a comic. And I was like, wait, you can like, I can make this, which I can make a book that looks as good as a Marvel DC book.
Right.
Which is, you can't do that with independent movies. Like even if you have $100 grand, like even if you have all the best equipment, like you're not going to make a movie that looks like a blockbuster movie. You're just not going to do it.
You could do almost like 5 to 10 seconds of like a Hollywood level film for $100 grand, you know, but no special effects. This would just be like purely lighting and camera quality. Like,
yeah, exactly. So you would I was like, I could do a whole thing. And like because I'd made movies, like my brain worked for comics. Like I got it like immediately. It looked like storyboards. Like I totally fell in love with it. And that's when I was off to the races with comics, and then novels came a couple of years later than that.
That's cool. So I mean, it's not too uncommon. I mean, a lot of people that I went to art college with who were in the comic book program, there was always this sort of like, yeah, I'd really like to direct a movie, and then you get into the comic industry and a lot of the comic book artists were like, I'd really like to direct a movie. So it's a natural kind of thing because it is a shot to shot type of storytelling, method. So there are differences that are like structurally different, which the two, things do not cross over. The Venn diagram does not meet, but, that's interesting. So, I mean, I can see that being a natural kind of fit. But like, I mean, but there's a lot, I mean, man, there's a lot of like stuff in your, in your glossing over the 6 month sort of like period, which is pretty significant. I mean, these are big life changes, having some sort of physical thing happen to your body, which sidelines you for more than, a week of your life, is a big thing. Um, Losing your sort of your career identity is another big thing. Getting married is another big thing. Moving, from it's, a large distance of space to a major city is a big thing. Like, all those things are really large, and they can break a lot of people. All that kind of stuff all together can really kind of, unmoor an individual one way or the other.
See, I think that it was just, to me, it was the culmination of like me marrying Karen and moving to Los Angeles were the culmination of things that I've been trying to do for years.
Right.
We've been trying to move to Los Angeles for years, or New York, but we couldn't because either her job or my job prevented it. So
Okay.
like, it's not that I was happy to get in a car accident and lose my job because of it, but like,
Right.
we got unemployment, like we got like I got like I was able to like to really see things in a different way, and I think that that's what I appreciate about like being unmoored all the time. I mean, like
Mhm.
if you own a business, like you're literally constantly unmoored. Like your
True.
whole life is just you're gonna one day you're gonna be in Los Angeles, and then you might be in North Carolina or like
Yep.
whatever. And as you get older, my stepmother died a few months ago, and like you're like going to Ithaca, like to like
Right.
do stuff, and like kind of the unmooring to me is a gift. And that
Yeah.
might sound weird, but I learned that very young that you, I, especially because it was in movies, like I was in movies, and like that's a very unmooring profession altogether.
Yeah.
Where like you could be not working for 6 months and then in Denmark for a month,
Yep.
like so I'm not going to say that it was like easy,
Mhm.
but I do think that I have been very good at barricading myself from those things, maybe,
So
or being able to roll with.
compartmentalizing.
Yeah, like for instance, I started doing comics, and they were very
Yeah.
expensive, and I was like, well, I could do novels. And
Right.
like I started writing novels, and like and then I didn't know what I was doing, and then eventually like I wrote a bunch of novels, and that I think my prowess with that overtook my comics, so I was just making a lot more of them.
Mhm.
And I think I've just been very good at rolling with the punches, and saying, well, this is what life has to offer. I read a lot of Taoism when I was a kid, and not that there's a ton of Taoist stuff, and like it's a very simple, relatively simple religious philosophy, which is basically like one of the big things, like if you go the way of the river, like things are going to be easier than fighting
Yeah.
against the current. And so, I mean, I've always I would still direct a movie tomorrow if I could, but like it's
Right.
just that's not the path. The
Yeah.
path was like books and movies, and doing and doing conventions, and like being out there and becoming this like quote unquote like guru of making money with books and stuff. And all of that stuff was just like they were the options available. And on some level, I've never stopped, I guess, to think about like, wow, that's a big bunch of stuff that happened, because to me they were just like, well, you get married to Karen, or you
Right.
don't. Oh, I'm gonna do that. Like, I lost my job. Like, I can't work. Like, I'm literally in
Right.
a neck brace. Like, I'm stuck here. Like, what
Yep.
can I do? I can write stuff. And then once we got married, it's like we started like move to New York. We were gonna move to New York, and then it
Mhm.
was, well, let's just try LA. And then like I was like, we
Right.
got there. I was like, oh, it's clearly Los Angeles. Like it's clearly here. And they were just so like clear. They were as clear as me picking up those books and my manager telling me how much that thing was. And it's like, I'm in comics now. Like if I can do this, and like this is really the price that I can make these books for, like I'm in comics now, and like
Yeah.
the movies can come or not. But you just I've always tried to be as valuable as possible with writing, with life, because there's kind of no other option. I got a chronic illness. I've had Graves' disease since I was like in my late 20s, which is like 13 years now.
Okay.
And like You just someone gave me mono when I was in college, and like that led to this, and that led to this other thing, and that led to this other thing, and that led to I probably couldn't even direct movies if I wanted to now, because like I just am in like so I can rue that.
Yep.
Which sometimes I do. Don't get me wrong. Like I rue it sometimes, but more often than not, what I try and just say is, okay, like what is the opportunity here? Like what is the thing how can I make a thing in the container that it'll, and I think that artists generally, people generally are very bad at that. They're very bad at saying, these are my limitations. Like, what can I make using these limitations? And that can be when you're first starting to write. You know, the first book that I wrote was a middle grade fiction novel because I knew it didn't have, the prose wasn't as complicated as a YA or adult novel. So
Sure.
I wrote them the chapters much shorter. The next book I wrote in blog posts, because I've been writing blog posts for a long time. And like it wasn't, and so like these were limitations that I was like, I can write a really good this thing. How can I set it in the container that will make it great and will make me be able to do this?
Where do you think? I mean, where do you think that? Like, where do you think you developed that? Because I mean, that's a really like, it's a very prescient skill set to have. Like, you know, something to be that aware. I mean, do you think it was from the early years of, you know, reading Taoism and being sort of present to your environment and your world and saying, okay. Because I mean, listen, you can fight the river and you can, you know, really be angry that you're not up at that island that's higher up in the river where everybody seems to be having a great time. Or you can say, but you know what? There's a real great eddy. If I just go over here, there's a great eddy that I don't have to fight so much. And there's a lot of stuff that comes swirling in there throughout the day.
My dad was a big fan of counter-cyclical living, which was where everyone go where people aren't.
Okay.
And I think that was very helpful in just this like idea that like it's not going to like, just because everyone wants it doesn't mean that like it's good. And also like just because you're not in with the in crowd doesn't mean you can't have a lovely parking spot just like 2 rows over, and you walk 30 more seconds, and instead of being frustrated for 30 minutes trying to get a space in the front, you just get a space in the back, and like you still saved yourself probably 20-30 minutes or 10 minutes because you're not going through all of the parking spaces. And
oh my gosh. I remember coming to that awareness of whatever age it was, where I'm like, I'm just going to pull in the parking lot and park. Like because then you would see the same people who were who were before you still driving around looking for something up front. I'm like, why?
Yeah. And I think that kind of idea, I mean, not the exact idea, but it's very similar to like working in creative field where it's like everyone is trying to direct a Marvel movie or write for DC or do all this stuff. But like, I don't know, like I parked a little further away, and I think I've had a pretty good career. You know, I made audio dramas and audiobooks and TV shows and novels and everything.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's get into that, because I mean, your output is amazing. It's impressive, and I want to talk about your sort of your daily process a little later. But like you're doing a wide variety of work, and all in the, you know, in the written form, whether it's audio or somebody else producing it in a visual fashion. But like it's a lot of stuff. So I mean, like, what kicked it off for you? Like, like you said, the first thing you did was a comic book, right? Like when
I made the movie,
right? Yeah, but I mean, like, but the comic.
Oh yeah, the comic. So I did I had my manager in 2008 or 9 or something like that. And I had these 2 scripts, Wannabes and Gumshoes. And when he told me about the comics, I decided to make this 8-page ashcan for the Wannabes, which is about fake superheroes that get real superpowers. And I mean, the name of my company is Wannabe Press because that's the logo. Like the logo is like I asked my logo designer to take off the S and just make Wannabe, and like that's the company. And so I went to San Diego Comic-Con 2010, and I thought that was it. Like I had this really nice comic. It still looks pretty today. It's so cute. I'm set in this world where like like this just Titan like died on this on Earth,
Yeah.
and it released all of this energy, and each of these energies like a superpower basically.
Okay.
And like it kind of goes to find the most courageous or person that's when someone dies.
Yeah.
So this big superhero who got like 5 powers dies, and meanwhile there are these kids who they're these kids who are like playing superhero, like they're just like cosplaying superheroes and like doing their own thing, and they end up like with these powers.
Yeah.
And it's still, I read it the other day, like it's still, I found it after not reading it for like years, and I found it again. I was like, this is still like cute. I mean, it's like not the most, it's not the greatest concept that's ever existed, but like it's super cute. And so I went down to Comic-Con, and like it looks great. I went down to Comic-Con, I was like, this is it, we're done. Like I'm selling this thing like everyone does. Everyone does. Sure. Like I've never met a comic book person that didn't like take their first thing and be like, this is the one that's I'm getting on DC, right? I'm getting like, they're gonna hire me for Spider-Man on Marvel. So I did that, and everyone around them rejected me, mostly saying, this was in 2010. Things have changed in comics since then. But they were like, why would I make an independent superhero comic when Marvel and DC do it? Now, it sounds silly to say that now because there are so many great independent superhero comics. But back then, I think it was like Invincible was like the thing that like I mean, I'm pretty sure it was starting in 2010. But like there was just no real independent superhero comics. And so I went, but I did it. I went, did the whole circuit. I met everyone. And then I came home bitter and dejected because I'd spent, I mean, it cost like $2,000 to go to Comic-Con. Like it's expensive, and like with printing and the cost of the books and all of that stuff. So I printed it out and gave it to, actually, no, I didn't print it out and gave it to a bunch of people. That's where I brought my iPad. I didn't even know that you're supposed to print them out. So I went to Kinko's and printed a bunch of copies out for people.
Okay.
And I came back and I was very dejected because like this was the shot, like this was the thing. Like I'd convinced my wife to like do it, and she'd been very supportive up until this point. Like none of my stuff had ever made any money, and still she's like, go and do these things. And so which like everyone has one of those, right? Like if you're doing this, if you succeed, like maybe not be like a wife, but a friend or a mother or somebody who's like, nope, don't quit, just keep doing it. And every time I was like, I should quit and get a job, she's like, no, you'll hate that.
Right.
So I came home and I was very bitter. I was very, very, very bitter about it. And you can, and I was like, you know, if I'm going to do this again, I'm making like the book I want to make. Just the literal, like you can track these things from like independent creators of any kind who just like, this is the thing. Like they do the pitch. That's like the movie pitch. Then they go, okay, like I'm going to do what I want. And I was cresting over the hill of the 405. The 405 in Los Angeles has this big hill before you get into the valley. And it's like, it's a very dangerous hill if you think about it, but like it goes very, very high. Then you crest it and like, you see the whole valley pretty much in front of you. And I was there and I got this idea for Ichabod Jones' Monster Hunter, which is about a psychopath that escapes a mental asylum thinking he's a hero, doesn't know if he's killing monstrous humans or it's all his head the whole time. And we've done 3 volumes. The 4th one launches in September. But this was like and I didn't think this was going to be the thing. Because like I was like, this is so weird. Because like he's definitely evil. Like before, like he's been tried and convicted of killing people. So like he's not, society has said he's a bad person. But I didn't want this. There's some other books around the same time that were like similarly, but like they were actually about like bad people. I wanted it to be more like ambiguous whether he was bad, which is why he has these like big, like blue eyes. But I want him to feel like a sympathetic character. But I did 5 pages of this and I was like, this is never good. I did a book called Paradise as well at the same time, which was a very much more convoluted concept. And like we did 1 issue and like I still like it, but like it's a very convoluted concept of like a town that's frozen and then wakes up 100 years in the future. So like I pitched Ichabod and like a company bought it, or a company offered to publish it. And I was like, oh, I got to make it now. Make the whole thing now. And so we did that. And then we had a falling out with that company. And happens. They didn't want to do print run. They just wanted to do ebook. Right. And so they, at some point they were like, you can do a Kickstarter for it. I was like, if I'm going to do a Kickstarter for it, like, I'm just going to make it. And they were like, you can do that then. Bye.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
is nice. Like, it wasn't like the whole Action Lab situation now. Like, they were very
Sure.
much like, cool, whatever, like, bye. And at the same time, I had done this, but while I was making that, I had this pitch for this web series that I had written called Katrina Hates the Dead, which became Katrina Hates Dead shit in the hardcover, and then Katrina Hates the Dead in the ebook. And it was originally 2 volumes, just the first 2 issues. Mm-hmm. I was going to do it also with Viper, which was the company, and then we had a falling out as I was making it, and I was like, oh, well, I don't want to do a one shot of this. So I ended up making it this big epic thing. So like the first 2 issues are the web series, which are also placed this one town pretty much during this one day. Mm-hmm. And then it breaks open and becomes this like big like zombie mythological fantasy book, which ends up being the Gods vs. Chronicles, was where that series started.
Yep.
So yeah, I had these 2 books. And the money came from the car accident.
Okay.
Got like a check, and I was like, and instead of like saving it like a normal human, like I was like, hey Karen, I should use this to like make comics. And
you were investing it, Russell. You were investing it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly now it's clear that is accurate, but like back then I did not know that. Oh. So yeah, I went from wannabes to like Ichabod to Katrina, and in that time frame, Gumshoes got optioned in Hollywood somewhere, and I was like, oh, I need a book, and this needs to be like a book. I don't just want it to be like a thing. And so I wrote the first episode of Gumshoes as a novel, and then that became, and then the second, and then another book got optioned, another script got optioned. My father didn't kill himself. And I was like, oh, this should be my second book. So it kind of it's very organically kind of grew from there.
What's Gumshoes the first, was Gumshoes your first swipe at writing a novel then?
Yes.
Okay. So yes. I'm going to get a little more granular then, since now you're jumping into my favorite territory, which is writing novels. So, like, what did you? So I mean, you had an outline because you had the script. So you weren't walking into this, sort of discovery writing. You had an outline from beginning to middle to end, but you had a 90-page story. In terms of your film. So the question is like, what did you do when you approached that to sit down and start writing prose? Did you go, all right, like, did you have an idea how long you wanted the book to be?
Yeah, so I knew that prose was my weakness, the prose part of it. So I knew that the structure was good because it got optioned. So like it had to be good enough to like people liked it.
Right.
So I kept the general structure, I kept the general characters, but like I was very worried about prose. And so I said, well, I should not make this. When I was looking for the first book, I was like, I'm not confident in my prose yet. So I need to write something that has more simplistic prose. And so kind of looked at the time and I was like, well, YA is a little too complicated. First reader is a little too young. So like I did a middle grade book because I thought that I could nail the prose because it's a very simple prose style. And then I went about taking the outline, the script and breaking it down to its beats of like, okay, this, and sort of every scene was like a chapter.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And then every chapter was roughly 4 250 word beats.
Okay.
So, with a section, a scene heading delineation between them. And each one would be like following one of the characters in one of the 3 main characters of the book. And I was trying to be very strict with that at first, where I was like 1,000 word chapters, 250 words each, for 4 segments. Sometimes it was 3, sometimes it was 5. And then, and each one had to be like a different setting. And I kind of have kept that, less so now, all the way through many of the Godsverse books.
That's that's cool. It's great that now, did you do research to get that, or is this some sort of equation you just kind of figure it out on your own, or did you say like, well, I'm looking at a bunch of middle grade books and they're about this, and
Yeah, I think it was more like my own instinct, but
yeah.
I'm sure. I mean, I've always read a lot about writing before I started, and I've been a big reader for a long time.
Mhm.
But a lot of it was just I wrote some practice chapters, and
Okay.
like that's how it. And I'm a stickler for like if you set up a format
Yep.
to like continue it for the whole book. Like I
Yeah.
generally don't like, sometimes I will break and write like a 200 word chapter or like a 10 word chapter or 5,000 word chapter. But like generally when I'm writing a book, if the chapters are between 1,000 and 1,500 words long, like they are all within that same scope. So you know what you're going to get each time. And so when I started that book, like you can see it's very formulaic in that
Super
way, where like
rigorous.
each chapter is roughly the same distance.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's pretty cool. And like, so like with YA and middle grade, from the what I've read in that arena, it's the, it prosaically, um, small words. But one thing I found that was interesting is a lot of repetition.
Mm.
Because the characters are constantly repeating themselves to, I guess that is the idea, is to make sure that the reader still knows what's going on. So we're not losing sort of key, plot threads.
Well, I think that like you need to do that in any book that you write. I do that in my, I do that
Yeah.
in every book that I write. I try and start a chapter rehashing partially what the previous chapter did,
Yeah.
and make sure that every roughly 20 to 25,000 words, like wherever they are like in a place where they can rehash what's happening, because I don't expect people to remember what
Yeah.
happened 100 pages ago. But I did a kids a picture book called the Bird and the Little Worm, and the theme was repeating the same words, repeating. So
Yeah.
yes, I would say that's accurate. The other thing that especially middle grade, but YA as well, is they're more worried about the social status and things, and the social world of the of the reader, than they are about like necessarily making the plot like move real super fast. Like, and when I did Gumshoes, I very much wanted to make it about these two outcasts who
Mhm.
meet this popular girl who the book's about it's called The Case of Madison's Father. So Madison is the most popular girl in school. Her father goes missing. These two guys are like dorks. The two people who have this treehouse, and like, so like the worlds clash, and it's about like she being popular and realized, and like being like, hey, come on with me, and then being like, we can't do that, like it's not our scene, and then
Right.
realizing that it was that, like she realizes that like her bubble is very like inclusive and
Mhm.
very exclusive, and so all of those things are like the plot then happens, but like that's the book, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what I tried to seed into a lot of my books, less so the gods, not less so my long series, but especially my standalones. Like the book is about this,
Right.
but like it's really about this.
Right. And the theme is the theme is what the book is about, and your plot is the story. And and you get to sort of enforce the theme throughout the whole, plot
Yeah.
actions.
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of adult books, especially genre books, are very much like there's a plot point and then there's another one, and it's a lot of weaving between plot points and not so much thematically saying what like Jack Reacher's doing today.
Right. Right. Well, typically, I mean, and I love the Jack Reacher books, but there's not a lot going on inside of Jack Reacher as a protagonist. I mean, he's sort of very fixed in his worldview. Um, yeah, that's interesting. I loved all of those um detective books, the kid detective books growing up. Like if there was a kid who was sleuthing out a problem, I was there. I loved all those variants, growing up. So they were so I get the instinct, on your end. Like, yeah, that's a great, sort of book that you can write. You can take these stories and turn it into that whole thing. And
And it's very formulaic. The nice thing about when you're
yeah.
trying to write prose is if you're trying to write in, let's say, fantasy, like fantasy is a big genre that like does not have clearly defined plot points. But
Yep.
when you write a mystery novel,
Oh,
Like, you know, like, okay, there's going to be a crime, and then there's going to be a clue, then there's going to be a misdirection, then there's going to be
yep.
an accusation, a false accusation, there's going to be an accusation. The same thing happens with romance, where like, you know, there's going to be a meet cute, then a first date, then a misunderstanding, and then like a get back together. And I'm simplifying it, but I
No,
think that when you're starting to learn prose, it's really nice when you can go into something that is very formulaic, because you know, like, you have the guardrails.
yeah, no, there is a sort of a rough map that you're always going to be to fall back on. You go, okay, because you're not going to go like, geez, what happens next? I mean, like the point is like, here's what happens next. Now, how you make that happen, there's where you can make the magic happen. But
Yeah.
it's a pretty fun thing when writing specific genre. But like I think fantasy and science fiction are wider elements to that where people don't expect. I mean, if it's hard science fiction, there's a very strong desire that there has to be good science in there. But
Well, I think that it's nice to put. So one thing that I always tell people to do is, like, if you're not going to put that kind of like mystery, and you can do that for you can do, there's fantasy mystery novels.
oh, for sure.
There's like same thing with science fiction, but like put a container on it, make it a road trip, make it a year, like Harry Potter is like a year in
Yep.
Hogwarts, or like the Hunger Games is like this one thing that like
Yeah.
you have 20 and then it goes down to one, and like, you know, how
Yep.
like there's a container that you can follow and say, okay, I'm lost. What is next? Okay, like we've got 15 kids. How am I
Sure.
going to kill the next one?
Yeah.
Or oh, it's March. How am I going to get to April?
Yep. No, and I think readers and readers by and large appreciate that because they, like To Kill a Mockingbird, there's a trial. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's a structure and we're going through this structure. So we as the reader kind of have an understanding what's going to happen procedurally. And I
And
think
well,
that's
that's the most important part for me. The most important part is that the reader opens a book and believes you are going to lead them on a journey that will be interesting, but they will end up safe and understand it at the end. So
yeah.
I always can say, like, a roller coaster.
Mhm.
Like, you wouldn't go on a roller coaster if you didn't know if you're going to make it out in the end. So like, you have to you have to believe that that's going to be constructed in a way that you will get to the end.
That's a brilliant idea to have a roller coaster that rolls up with nobody in it every time.
Yeah,
Because the roller coaster comes up and everyone gets out. But wouldn't it be great if like it rolls up and people spray it down and they go, okay, everyone come on, like, and there's just a black hole, like where
I
it
have a
goes.
feeling that would not be so popular as a roller coaster, because
No, but I'm
people want.
I
Yeah,
think that is like, but there's a, that's a bit from a Simpsons thing. You know what I mean? Like, boy,
yeah,
I don't know why this isn't making any money,
for
So,
sure. For sure. But like, if people want to explore their fear, or they're like enamored in something, like that's why they come to roller coasters, why they come to books, like they
yeah,
want, but they don't. Like, I think the reason that people have a bad time generally in books is like, they are like, oh, no one knows I don't know what's going on, like I don't
well,
know.
yeah, literature. That's
Yeah.
literature. Like the distinction is you have genre writing, and then you have literature. In literature, you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. You can pick up, a Michael Chabon novel, and you're going to go like, well, I have no idea what's going to happen in this thing, and you're going to go on a journey, and provided the author does the right work, you're going to enjoy the journey and you're going to gain from it. But
Right, but that is something that you know when you pick up a Michael Chabon book, right, or a
yeah,
John Irving book. Like, you're going on a journey, but you trust the journey
you have to.
is going to, like. And so I think a lot of when people's resistance to new writers or new writing or new anything is like, I already know the journey. I
Yeah,
know the journey over here. Like, I don't know if you're going to tell a good journey.
totally.
It's
Well,
nothing about like, oh, this is a new book or whatever, or free. Like, people are always like, here's my free book for downloading this thing. And I'm like, nobody cares about the free book. Like, nobody cares about the free book.
dude, so I lived in New York City for 25 years, so you see it all when you live in New York. And the hardest thing in New York City to do is give anything away for free. You can stand on the corner like, hey, here's a free thing. People are like, fuck off, I don't want this,
Yeah.
because they don't want it's like, it's so hard. So like, you're right. I mean, like, people want what they want. X-Men sells. X-Men's comfortable. That's like your old pair of shoes. I'm gonna
Right.
go read the X-Men,
But
regardless of
people,
whether it's good or not.
well, people are desperate for like new stories. So like this is the dichotomy when it comes to like selling books is people are desperate for new stories, but they're scared they're going to waste their time and
Totally.
they don't, and they have very few of it. So they
Yeah.
have very little of it. So like a free book is a great way to entice people to try your book, your world, and then buy more stuff. But like the free book is nothing. The free book is like a bit on a hard drive. Like
Right.
the interaction is like, will they read that book and then be like, oh, okay, like, oh,
Yeah.
this next one's like $3, whatever. This next one's $5. Yeah, okay, I'll try it, and then become fans of your work. Because like once you have fans of your work, then like you are like off to the races because they'll
Yeah.
follow you anywhere.
Right. And listen, it's an investment. Reading a book is an investment. A comic is like, that's an under, it's like a half hour of somebody's time to sit and read a comic book. But to say, hey, you want to read a novel, even if it's free, someone's like, okay, okay. Like, I mean, I had what, a dozen or so people read my, beta readers, to read my book. And I was like, I was like, oh my God, like, is anybody gonna read this stuff? Because I beta read for people, and it's like, okay, like you really have to like put your time into it because it's new and it's unknown. So you really are, you have to really kind of forge ahead. So yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's super tough making that new thing for people, regardless of whatever the medium is. So you got the book, the middle grade book. What did you do with it?
I had a publisher actually.
Okay, okay.
Had a same thing happened. Basically, I was like, and the picture book
Yep.
also came out from that publisher, but they were using Ingram Spark to like, and I was like, I can use Ingram Spark to do that. So like, I'm just
Right.
gonna do that. And so I bought the rights for that, for the publishing rights back for
Mhm.
those books, and I then went and did my own thing, and that was about the same time Ichabod, the first Ichabod Jones Kickstarter came on, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna have my own publishing company then.
Yeah,
Like I got Ichabod, I
right.
got these two other things, I have a couple of other books that are coming out, and started really like rocking and rolling with that, and that was right around 2014. I left my job in 2015. So like it kind of all came to a head at one point where it's like I had Ichabod, I had these other two books, I had like a table at San Diego Comic Con in 2015, and like it kind of all connected there. And
Yeah.
I had Paradise, the first issue of Paradise also. So like I had like four things on my table, and we did these free crappy drawings for people to get people in. And but like, yeah, I had the book with the publisher. I got the rights back to the publisher. Got published my first published Ichabod, and then like all of the rest of it kind of exploded from there because then I needed more product to be on my table because people had
Right.
bought the first thing, and then I needed more product, and then the big break, my big break happened in 2017. But before then, I was like very much like I just need to keep putting these things out and slowly like building a fan base
Yeah.
and be out in front of them, talking to them, and then eventually like they will buy,
Yeah.
or they will like this will like take to the next level, or um like I will be exhausted and I won't be able to do this anymore.
Right. Right. So it's either do or die in that respect. You're like, okay, we're gonna get through this. How did the Kickstarter start off for you? Like, I mean, you did it. Did you have the same expectations as you did when you went down to San Diego with your comic for the first time?
No, because I'd spent years now. So there's a community called Comic Book Sunday in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And I'd spent years in that community at that point. And I would like shown people books. And like when I went to Comic Con the first time, I was like, I'd never done a Comic Con before.
Right.
San Diego's my first one. And so I was like, I had no idea what I was doing. I came home and I started like really getting into the community. So like I feel like I had like a bunch of friends and like I had a bunch of support. I did not know what it was going to do, but like I was much more confident than I was with wannabes because I had done two campaigns before. So I had done two failed Indiegogo campaigns for Katrina
Okay.
Hates the Dead. And so I kind of knew what was happening over there. I kind of knew what it was like to run a crowdfunding campaign. And then like when I did the real one, the Kickstarter one, I learned a whole bunch from those first 2 campaigns, and we had like over 150 backers, which was literally more than I'd ever made in 1 month before on my own creativity. And this was when I still had a job, because to go back, I failed like 4 companies by the time I was 30. It sucked. But when you fail one company, like you're like, it could be luck. It's like two companies can be like chance. By the time you get to 3 or 4, you're like, oh no, this is a me problem. Like I'm making the wrong choices. Like I'm picking the wrong partners. I'm focusing on the wrong things. So I was like, I need to learn how to sell things.
Right.
And so I literally got a job at Aflac selling insurance, and then I got a job at this place called Recycler selling car dealerships, like marketing stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
And then I finally got a job at a Sprint dealership, where I stayed, and I moved up from nothing to like sales manager in like 2 years.
Okay.
But I was there. And so I learned how to sell. So when I did the campaign, it was 2014. So I still was at that job. I think I was even maybe sales manager at that point. If not then like soon after that, I moved up to sales manager. And so like I knew how to sell at that point. Like I was a professional sales person. And I was mostly worried if those skills would translate to like selling books. And all of the work I've done in nonfiction is doing that translation from like, here's what sells, here's what like sales is, and like, here is what like art is, and here is how to make the gap between these two things and like translate that.
Yeah. That's the secret sauce right there. I mean, it is being able to target that customer, find the customer, target them, and speak to them. And
it's very different, because with phones, it's like your phone is broken, or I can save you a bunch of money. With like the thing that we do with books and art is like maybe less like graphic design or like copy editing, but like for a novel, like no one needs a novel. Like no one like we all want novels, like they're all like edifying things, but like they're not like if there's never another novel, A, there'd be plenty of novels to read, and B, like the world would still keep functioning. The publishing industry would just move to doing nonfiction or whatever other stuff. But like, so like it's a different, you have to not appeal towards the things that most people appeal to when you're talking about sales, which is like pain points. You need a new logo, you need sales copy, you're about to run a big promotion, and you need like imagery, whatever the thing is, you have to come from like heart-based selling, which is, like edifying of the soul. You have to make a connection. It's like a whole different approach, but it is also the exact same approach, just with like different words and other analogs. Like there are other analogs that exist in the world. It's just not just like books, but it's like the same, but also entirely different.
No, I totally get it. So I mean, but not too long, obviously you said 2014, then 2015, you sort of, cut the rope and you went off on your own completely, in business. So that's a pretty bold move. And so, but the way to do it is to, as you said, you needed to keep putting new things on the table. So how did you say, okay, how do I make new stuff? Like, what was your thought process in developing new work to put onto your table?
Sure. So 2015, I did not leave my job by choice, but I also wasn't fired. So I wanted another year to get all this stuff set up. So I was ready. Like I'm not like a job kind of human. Like I'm not a job person. Like I'm a be on my own, like do my own thing kind of person. But like I needed more time. So I left in 2015. I started my own Verizon dealership that like made a lot of money. Made most of the money that first year. Made like 50 grand the first year, and probably like 40 of it was the Verizon dealership. The next year we made 50 for a whole year. We made 40 for half a year. We made 50 or something like the next year in 2016, which is like double the amount of time for making almost the same amount of money. So that 2016 was like we had launched a couple of novels that I had already written. So I think the biggest thing was like I had stuff already in there. People are always trying to start stuff with like one project, but like I didn't do that. I had A, I had jobs, but B, I had like a bunch of Ichabod 1, I had Katrina 1 that had been done for years. I had multiple novels. I had a picture book. I had a sketchbook. I drew a comic book while I was at that job. I drew a comic book called Gherkinboy and the Dollar of Destiny. So like I had that on my table. Right. So I had like 6 books, but that I had made over the course of, let's say, 1 year from 2010 to 2015. But we didn't have, because we were like 50 grand sounds like is like a good salary, right? But like it's not good revenue.
No, right, sure.
Because like it's all going out, so like we didn't have a lot of money to then pay for like new production. So I that's why I started doing anthologies.
Gotcha.
Pretty heavily. And I did an anthology called Monsters and Other Scary Shit, which we put together in 2016. And my idea was that if I brought together a bunch of people who all did roughly the same kind of books as I did, but all had little audiences, like not random other people, like people that all did like monster books or like fantasy or sci-fi or like horror books in the way that I did. And I got 50 of them or whatever, 30 of them, it ended up being like 50 people or something across like 224 pages. If I brought all them together, then like I could show these people's audiences like what an awesome book I did. And like maybe some of them would, and we ended up doing $25,000, which if you remember the year before was half of my income.
Right. Totally.
So 25 grand from that book. And then my other theory was if I did another book right after that, that was like similarly in tone and style and art of the cover,
which was done by Aaron Alexovich. I like that. Let me grab this.
Yes. And so the next book raised $25,000 for a graphic novel that I just did. It was me and one artist. So it went from 50 people to like one person. And then we had some wiggle room. Then we were like, okay, what do we want to do? And that's when 2017, I was like, I did the Cthulhu is Hard to Spell book because I went back and I was like, how do I do a better one? Do I do like a better one of these? And so I went, and Cthulhu is Hard to Spell. Like it has Cthulhu right in the name. I was like, that's my fandom's kind of like number 1 or number 2 behind Invader Zim. So the artist does the character design for Invader Zim, did the cover for that, just like he did for Monsters and Other Scary Shit. Has Cthulhu right there. Like we brought in did all color. We like fixed kind of all the problems that people had told us about the first book. And we raised $40,000 on that book from over 1,000 people. And like once you've got thousands of people buying your books, like things become like your next move becomes a lot easier to plan because you're like, I'm probably going to be able to keep some of these people.
Yes.
So that was 2018. And then by that time in 2018, I've been writing novels pretty consistently, like a novel a month for like, ended up with like a novel a month for 18 months, basically.
So what's your page count? I mean, what's your page count in your books then?
It goes from
writer's curiosity,
50 to 90.
Okay.
Something like that. They're usually around, those ones were a lot shorter though. What I ended up happening is I wrote 3 books and then I compiled them into one book. So I really wrote like one book, one like 120,000 word book over the course of like 3 months. But like they were like, each one was like 40 to 50,000 words for those ones.
Yeah.
And they're all the Gods vs. Chronicles is when that all started. And the reason I started doing novels very heavily was 2 reasons. The first was that I just didn't have enough shows and like artists were off doing work and like I needed to do something.
Yep.
So I did something. I did that. Like I was like, well, I can do novels.
Sure.
Because like I don't need anyone except an editor.
Yeah.
And then the second reason was I knew I needed, in order to sell novels, you really need like a series, like a long series, like a 10-book series for a novel, like especially in fantasy, which is what I write. So I was like, I have to write a lot in order for me to actually like get through this thing. of like trough and like actually make money doing like books, like
Mhm.
books, I really need like 10 books in one series. And that was boring to just write 10 books in one series. So that then I would space it out and write one book in one series, then another book in another series, and then go back and forth. So after like 2 years, I had like 20 books
Yeah, sure.
because I was just going back and forth between these series and also trying new stuff, because that's always been a thing that I really try to do with my writing. Is every new series I try to add something else to my toolkit so that I can, like, I was very bad at romance for a long time, and
Yeah.
like, so I did a book called Invasion, which was like very romance heavy, and then now Obsidian Spindle is very romance heavy, and other stuff. So each series that I had, I kind of was like, okay, what do I want to learn? So like, even though the books maybe not sold so well, I like learned something that would help in the main series that I was writing.
Right. That's really interesting. Yeah, it's I mean I mean that's the goal. Like every single time you sit down to write the next book, like what are the things that you can do to make this better and better and better each time around? And it's a challenge. Now, let's get a little process in, and then we'll talk about your latest anthology coming out. So, um, what's your day? Like, what is the cock-a-doodle do?
I get up, well, recently I've been getting up before 6. Generally I get up at 6.
Okay.
I start work between 8 and 9. Well, I then feed my dogs, assuming they want to get up when I get up. Walk them. I sit on my computer usually between 7 and 7:30. My wife comes out for breakfast around 7:45, 8.
Hmm.
But between that time, I'm doing all of the admin BS stuff that comes up in a day. I'm answering emails and uploading stuff to Kindle and scheduling whatever stuff I have to schedule, planning, working with artists, whatever. From 9 to about 2, I'll do writing. I try to write 5,000 words a day,
Okay.
or edit 25,000 words if I'm in editing mode. I'm either in writing mode, editing mode, or promotion mode.
Okay.
And when I'm in promotion mode is the only time I'll do interviews before 2.
Okay.
And then I have to kind of break it up and do like my morning, then promotion, and then afternoon stuff, and catch up later. Or I try and start earlier in the day. But generally I will do I also have a one launch day. So like when I launch a book on that day, I have a different kind of day, because I have to do, it's a lot of stuff when you're actually doing like a launch day that you have
Sure.
to do. You don't have to do like day 3 of a launch, just to do like day 1, like actually
Right.
hitting the button to launch the book, and then like sending
Yeah.
all the emails and getting all the stuff. Like, you're not doing that the rest of the launch days, even if your launch is a month and a half long. So I'll do like 5,000 words, and then I can do whatever I want with my day. I usually, well, before I would work out and I'd read and I'd do all sorts of stuff. I'm uh, sick now,
Yeah.
so like
Right.
I can't like do all of the stuff that I normally do. But like usually that I try admin stuff in the morning, then writing 9 to 2, and then red time, which is like I can do whatever I want until 5. Then usually 5 to like 6 or 7 is
Hmm.
like more admin time,
Sure.
or
Wrap
scrolling through
your day up.
Facebook or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Trying to figure out marketing activities, because that's a lot of what I do when I'm not writing is like, how am I going to market all of this stuff that I like
Yeah.
have?
That's it. Yeah. No, I mean, it is a challenge. So I mean, for someone who says that they were not very comfortable, or that was a weak suit was prose, I mean, 5,000 words a day is a lot. That's not a,
Well, yeah, you have to. So I did the first book and I was weak at prose. The second book I did all was My Father Didn't Kill Himself. It was all blog posts. So it was 2 girls blog. It's about a girl whose father commits suicide, and she finds that she believes it's a murder and sets
yeah.
out to prove it's a murder. And it's epistolary between these 2 girls doing blog posts. And
Hmm.
between those 2 books, I thought that I had improved my prose quite a bit. My third book, which is now called Sorry for Existing, was all prose. Was like a full, like a novel, not epistolary, not like middle grade. And then I kind of moved out from there. So, I mean, yes, I've written now, I think 40 novels. I'm much better at prose now than I was with that first one.
Do you,
But
are you, I mean, are you, I mean, because like, are you outlining the books? I mean, because
oh yeah, Oh yeah,
Okay.
I use a process that Michael Moorcock developed about how to write a book in 3 days. I don't
Right.
write a book in 3 days, but I do use his outline.
Yeah. So you're outlining it. It sounds to me like if you're writing 50,000, pay or word novels, you're doing a 2 week pass. So in 2 weeks you get the pass of the book, the book done, so to speak. Now, and then do you kick it off to an editor at that point? Do you kick it off to
So
an alpha reader? How do you?
I start with 3 edits. I used to start with 8 edits. So what happened?
Sure.
The main difference between me writing now and me writing 2011 is that like it used to take me 8 to 10 edits to get a book done.
Mhm.
Now, and what would happen is eventually what happens is like between my ninth and 10th revision, like nothing changes. I'm like, well, I don't need that 10th revision now. And then the 8th
Right.
one, and then kind of like, so now I pretty much do 3. I do, I do 25,000 words for a book like that I'm writing now, 25,000 words day 1, 25,000 words day 2. Then I do
Right.
a pass where I read the whole thing. And
Mhm.
then I do a pass for just like general proofing, but really it's a look. I'm very big on like a book has to look good. Like there can't be too much black space. The paragraphs can't be too long. Like it has to be varied and look. So I do one for like look, and then I pass it off to my editor. She does a pass. I do another pass. She does a final pass. I pass
Yeah.
it off to my proofreader. And depending on the book, I pass it off to the other proofreader. And then like it's done and it's out, and then I format it. Sometimes I format it before I send it to the editor. Usually I do it afterwards, after I have the whole series all done.
All right. Okay. No, that
And
makes.
I almost always have the cover before I do anything.
Really?
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
you come up with are you coming up with your title? Like when you sit down, you're like, okay, I'm gonna have the title is gonna be. I'm just gonna click on one of your books right here, this one. So you go like The Wicked Witch, and then
So
and then
I have a cover designer that I love
yeah.
named Creative Paramita, and she does a lot of pre-made covers. And
Okay.
so I back then I trolled through all of her covers and I
Mhm.
like found a bunch and I was like, this is the series. Like,
Okay.
and she did the first one she did actually was the Wicked Witch the Sleeping Beauty, and it was literally the cover of the Sleeping Beauty as it is. Like that is the cover that she had. Like
Right.
and I was like, well, that's the beginning of a series for sure. And then I was like, well, now the other books have to kind of follow the fairy tale theme because that's what I wanted. So I did the Wicked Witch and the Fairy Queen and the Red Rider, and then like that was like the first bunch of those books. And then I have 8 more that I've written in that series. But usually I will have the cover. There's
That's
a couple
amazing.
of there's a couple of books I do not have the covers for. That I've now written 40 books, and like now I'm not having covers necessarily all of the time.
Right. No, that's really interesting. It's because it's truly the opposite of how everything else gets done. So I love that you have this sort of visual sort of flag, sort of like right above your screen that you can kind of look at, as you're writing to kind of get
Yeah, and I
that vibe.
literally do have the back in my background, not now, but for years was like all of the covers, and I would X
Yeah.
them out as I went through them. But yeah, I have like 3 or 4 cover designers that I kind of look for their stuff and try and get inspiration from. But I've always been very visual, like going back to the movie things. Like I kind
Yeah.
of need the theme, how the cover is going to feel before I can like get into the writing of it and like that it's real to me, and also that I like owe it because like I'm like, hey, I spent $800 on these 8 covers, like or 5 covers or whatever.
Right.
Like I gotta do the books now.
Exactly. No, that's a huge thing because, like, like, hey, hot tip for any designers out there or anybody who's working with clients: get money from them right off the bat, because it's not the matter of the fact that you want to get paid, because we all want to get paid, but nothing makes a client want to get a job done quicker than having them have handed money to you, because they're like, their clock starts ticking. If
Yeah.
you just start doing the job and you're like, you get paid at the end, man, the client will drag their heels. So you are your own client in this respect, and you put the money out and you're like, I got to get this done because I got
Yeah,
to.
that's really important too, because like I do feel like I'm a publisher and a writer and an
You are.
editor. And like and I think it's really important for me. I don't know if it would be helpful to other writers, but to make the distinction of like publisher Russell has a deadline for writer Russell.
Right.
Like it's not a immovable deadline. Like I run a company called Wannabe Press. Like these are the deadlines that I impose on writer Russell or editor Russell, and like they are immutable. Now I am so many years like past, like I'm 2 years ahead of my slate right now, so like I'm a little bit more lax with like writer Russell than I normally am, but like I've always been very good at saying like, this is my publishing deadline, and like publisher Russell needs to do all of the marketing and publishing things, so he needs this book by X day, and then work backwards from there. And it's been very helpful for me as a like person who like likes a deadline to look at it in those like two different things that have two different jobs. And for publisher Russell's job is that between 9 and 2, he lets writer Russell write. Like that is his job. He gets through all of the BS between waking up at 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. or whenever I stop. But like the best job that he can do is block off those 5 hours for me to write.
Yeah, no, I get it. It is, I mean, it's crucial. I mean, you know, and oh man, like anybody who wants to write, man, you have to write. You got to write every day. You got to write. And the thing is it's going to stink. You got to be okay with it stinking. You got to get through that, because if you think you're waiting for perfection to exit your fingertips, then you can write, you'll be waiting a long time. So just
that muscle just gets stronger also as you use it,
sure.
you know, like, so like if you're writing, even if you're writing 200 words a day or 100 words a day or whatever you're writing a day, like you can build that up, you know. It's like, when you've not exercised in a long time, like you can't get back and do a marathon. Like you have to do like slow and slow and slow. And then like slowly you'll be able to do more. You know, people always ask, how did I get 13 books done in my last year? I got 13 novels done last year. And I was like, well, that doesn't include like shorts and anthologies and comics or anything. So like I got a lot done last year, but I was like, but my first 5 books took 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, and I learned tricks to do then. And I met editors who I trust. Like I wouldn't just send like the thing that I send to my like I've worked with these editors for a long time before. It's like, I know what they're going to give me back. Like I'm not just sending it to like a random editor.
Yeah.
So I'm like much more confident in like also cutting drafts when it's for them. And other editors I spend longer doing books for. So yeah, you really have to. You have to.
Totally. No, it's a super important thing. I just, you know, I mean, and it goes with everything. It goes with drawing. It goes with anything, making movies, whatever the thing is, music. You just got to do them, you know, and it's okay. You're going to get better the more you do it. You know, waiting to become great is not going to happen. You have to make the mistakes to become great.
Well, there's something that really is important, which is like, you have to get very comfortable with the product being the end, like with like that being the goal. If you start getting too hung up on the sales being the goal, or like the movie being the goal or whatever, like you will never be happy. Like you have to be, to me, the thing that I've learned the most in the past couple of years, especially as my books have gotten more popular, is like, I have to be happy with the work. If I can be happy with the work, I can sell it in 10 years. I can relaunch it in 3 years, like whatever, if it doesn't do well. But like, I have to be happy with the work. And I have to be able to know that once I've made that, I'm going to be selling it for, I mean, I made Ichabod in 2010. I'm selling it now. It's 12 years later. So, you know, all of this stuff, like it builds over time. And like, you don't have to think that every word that you've written is amazing, but like you have to be able to say, my best book, the book I think is my best book I've ever written, never sells, ever. And it's so good. It's my dad's favorite book. It's my wife's favorite book. Like it's my favorite book I've written, and like it never sells. But like the market does not determine quality. The market determines popularity. But like it does not, and like if your goal is like to sell 50,000 copies of a book, and like it sells 10,000 copies, then like, yes, that is a failure. But if your goal is to make a great book that resonates with people, and then it does that,
Yep.
like you can live with the fact that you spent months, years, like making that thing.
And I mean, and you were saying about the, relaunching of things. I mean, man, that's the thing. Like, the adage of there's no wrong answer, because the thing is that it might not be the right answer for the question being asked, but that answer is the right answer for something else.
Yeah.
And your favorite book, you don't know what is going to be in the zeitgeist in 2 years or 4 years from now. And your book could be the right thing at that time. So when someone says like, hey, there's this great thing, I just read this thing, it's like from 2017 and it's unbelievably good. And the next thing you know, it explodes, and because it's the right answer for the time. And that's just what it is. So speaking of the time and the right answers, what about boom, Battle Royale?
So I'm so proud of this series, the series that Chris and I put together. I envisioned it in 3 parts. The first part being the gods about to invade the universe, the Lovecraftian gods. The second one is the gods invade and they have taken control. And the third is mythological gods and heroes of old band together to try and repel the gods. And so this is the 3rd volume. Cthulhu is Hard to Spell Battle Royale. It's 34 stories, 180 pages.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's the biggest one we've ever done. We did 172 is the first one, 160 was the second one. This one's 180. So it is easily the longest one. I made some restrictions on people the last time where they could only have a story that was 2 or 4 pages if they were in volume 1. In volume 3, I didn't make any of those restrictions. Everyone had like way longer stories. And I mean, I've edited now 4 anthologies, and like they all like crank up. But I love this series so much. It's so fun. I think it's everything that like in my world I like, cute and scary and like creepy and like silly like together. And this book is, the series overall is 107 stories, over 500 pages. And like, it really does. The only rule is like, it has to focus on the gods themselves, not like, because the thing with Lovecraft is Lovecraft's, like the gods were a very ancillary part of Lovecraft's universe. Like it was a lot of detective, and then it was like creepy person goes to creepy town, finds creepy cult trying to raise creepy god, and then like horror happens.
Yeah, totally.
And so I wanted to flip that and make it about the god, about like make it about the gods, their everyday life, their trials and tribulations, their like horrors, their like action. And I don't know, my wife read it and she liked it, and that's kind of like all I care about, because I think that if she likes it, anyone will like it that is in my audience. So
great. No, it's great. It's a blast to read, and there's some amazing talent in this book. I was just like, wow, like it's like throughout the whole thing. So I really enjoyed it. I appreciate the advanced reader copy, because it was a great read.
Oh, I'm glad. And this is the first time that we had the only real complaint that we got from volume 1 and 2 was that the cover did not relate to an interior story of the book.
Okay.
And this is the first time that we've done, like, we have a wrestling story inside the book.
It sure does relate. Yes.
Yeah. It was done by a different artist, and it's a different thing. It has a different outfits, but like it is a wrestling story, and that is Zeus being taken from the pylon by Cthulhu.
Yeah. No. It's and the way you sort of pulsed it through the book. Great. It's a lot of fun. So when is this available for the folks? Because it'll be, I guess, in a day. I think when this airs, it'll be like a day or two. So
yeah. So you can it launches the 22nd of February, and it goes until the 5th of April. And it's on Kickstarter at CthulhuIsHardToSpell.com. You can just go there and you can get all 3 volumes. I mean, if you like We actually have 4 volumes of
Go
anthology.
to his website or his Twitter to get there, because Cthulhu is hard to spell and you may mess it up in the URL.
Yeah, it's easier to remember if you remember the second H is for horror. People usually forget the second H because it's so that people remember CTH. Then they just go ULU, and so I thought second H is for horror is how I've remembered it, because it's still, I've edited now 3 of these volumes and it's still the most misspelled word in the whole the whole anthology, even though we've now been doing it since 2017 when we started putting this together. So yeah, and my website will redirect to it during the campaign. But it's I mean, this is the biggest goal we've ever had for a book. It's our biggest book we've ever done, and like if you like anthologies, I mean, I can't imagine people that like anthologies like not liking this. If you like monsters, if you like Lovecraft, the real hook though is it is about the gods and monsters. So like it can be tonally anything, but it will focus on the gods, which except for like Call of Cthulhu and some of like the role-playing games, like I've never really seen like a thing that focuses on the gods in such a large capacity.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really appreciated how everybody really just, they sort of dialed the god of their interest up, or gods plural, and went into however the story they wanted to tell about the gods. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and it's just you learn like it's like 10% of the Lovecraftian lore is like about the gods, but they're such like the best, to me they're the best part of the universe. So I love that we got some like real like horror people. And we got some people like Kelsey Jo Silva and Angela Odling who just do like these very adorable monster things, or like sexy monster things, even though it's an all ages book. You know, we just, there's something I think for everyone, and there's like the pace is such that like you never get lulled into like a sense of like, oh, I've just read like 3 or 4 of the same kind of story in a row. Like we try and really like move things around.
Yeah, no, the variety is totally there. It's really great. So February 22nd, keep an eye out.
February 22nd, you can get all 3 volumes, and you can also get Monsters and Other Scary Shit, which is the first volume of our monster anthology. So the first volume is a monster anthology about monsters. This is a monster anthology about Lovecraft. So like it's in the same series, but it's a different like book, clearly. But it's in the same kind of like, we like monsters.
Yeah, clearly. Good. Yeah, just follow Russell on Twitter. That way, when it's going down, you'll be in the front row seat, because he's great on Twitter and keeps everybody up to date what's happening out there. What else? So let's see, we're early February. So what else can people expect to see?
Well, in June, I have a brand new 4 new books in my most popular series, The Godsverse Chronicles, coming out.
Hold on. Oh, nice. I'm going to embiggen you. Oh, I'm going to try to embiggen you. There you go. Awesome.
So this is book 1, and then book 2.
Nice.
Book 3.
Cool. Good colors.
Book 4, and there's 11. There's 11 total books in the series. I've done some cover work on the whole series, and I've included now. We have a planet guide and a timeline in the book. All of the formatting is now consistent between all 4 of the between all 11 books in the series.
Oh, that's nice.
And I'm very excited for that. So I've never done a big series before until 2019. This is a year like I'm like, oh wow, I did a bunch of series now, but I'd never done a series really until the Godsverse Chronicles. So in September, the 4th volume of Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter drops. It's the final volume.
Sweet.
So we've done in total 16 issues. And then at the end of the year in November, we have I'd said my favorite book. I meant my favorite book that was out. My favorite book that my wife and I, for both my wife and I, is a book called Anne in the Dark Place, which will be launching in November.
Oh, sweet. Oh, great.
So
is this on its own, or is this a part of a series?
And this is on its own. It's about a girl whose best friend dies and comes back from the dead to help her heal a rift from the living and the dead. And in doing so, they realize they were in love with each other, but they can never be together because they're one's a
Right.
ghost.
Separated. Yeah.
So, and like as they start solving the problem, she starts seeing, oh, when this problem is solved, like she'll be gone forever, and like
Right.
it's
Yep.
so. I mean, it's my wife loves it. I love it.
Cool.
So it's been sitting in my shelf for many years, waiting to finally come out. It was supposed to come out last year, and we had to like switch a publishing schedule because of some stuff. And so I'm so excited because, yeah, I'm slowly working through all of the books that I've written like 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm finally kind of be current. Like a lot of this stuff, I'm like, I wrote these books like 2 years ago. So yeah. I'm like very excited to be able to like move into the new year where like I'm working on more current stuff, like
Right.
with the Witch Academy, and the Dragon Strife books that I just launched.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, it is interesting. Publishing schedules sort of can douse the flame of excitement because you're sitting around waiting for it to happen.
Yeah, well, we had the Gods versus post launch in January, but we got a new proof. So we reproofed the book, and we did some like artwork, and I was not confident that it would be all ready by the time we needed to print it.
Yeah.
So I decided to flip that with a book called Dragon Strife that I had done just a couple months ago. So like it was the first time I'd been like, oh, I just finished this series like in August, and like I'm talking about it now. Like I remember actually what happens in it. I don't have to go back and reread the whole thing.
Right. Totally. Yeah, it is. Though it's great to reread older things because you're like, I didn't even know I wrote that. That's exciting.
Yeah, it was really interesting to read Ichabod again because I made it in 2011, and we restarted in 2019, and so I had to read it a bunch of times to like get the pacing right and get the tone right and figure out like what I was thinking about 10 years ago. Like it was like reading someone else's work. So it is very interesting to go back and read your stuff and be like, oh, I think this still holds up.
Yeah. That's awesome, dude. That is awesome. Well, Russell, thank you so much for joining. Well, me, not us, but me today. It was really great to hear your story and really kind of have you share so much about your process and the work that you do, because it's a lot, man. You're crushing it. So I thank you for taking the time to join us.
And thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I'm waiting for the music. This is what I do with Phil every week, and then he waits for me. Anyway, Russell, thank you so much. Like, follow, subscribe, whatever those things that people say they're supposed to do on the internet. Do that stuff for Russell. Find him. Find us at Big Story Pod everywhere. And we'll see you next time. Ciao.